Spring is officially here, so you should be getting outside and right down to it with some yard tune-ups. Or no, maybe you should not. Jim Drzewiecki of Ginkgo Leaf Studio is going to walk us through what should happen when for a Midwestern landscape. And the news, as always, is what I can personally use. I bet you're going to find it helpful too. Maybe the short version of this episode is a reminder that the actual weather and how much little green things are popping up is a much better guide for when to start than your calendar or any date on a website telling you what to do and when. But spring is also the perfect time to review and tune up your yard to think about what's been growing well and what has not been thriving. So we will also talk about how to make some design improvements to your mid-century yard as you do your spring tune-up. Welcome back to Mid-Modern Model. This is the show about updating MCM homes, helping you match a mid-century home to your modern life. I'm your host, Della Hansman, architect and mid-century ranch enthusiast. You're listening to episode 2313. Spring, by the way, isn't just the right time to get outside and make some changes to your yard. It is the correct time to master plan if you want to make bigger changes to your house next year, and especially if you want to start on anything this year. I would love to talk to you about what's on your mind for your house, from your 5-year plan to your summer DIY dreams. Every project will flow better and happen faster if you have a big picture vision that each smaller component and design idea can fit into. One more quick reminder, there will be no episode next week and for a little while. We've got a huge back catalog of good advice waiting for you, and if you'd like some curated recommendations of which episodes to go back and hit, make sure your name is on the mailing list. We'll put a sign-up link into the show notes page for this episode, so go find that and the transcript and all of the links and some pictures from Jim at midmod-midwest.com/2313. All right, sit back and let's get ready to listen to Jim explain our yards to us in simple language we can all understand. He's also going to have some tips on how to design improvements, how a great design is assembled, everything from placement to foliage to color to seasonal shifts. You might want to grab a notebook, but honestly, I think the upshot is just so much respect for the process and the planning and the talent and also the almost the engineering that goes into a landscape design. There's always more to learn. Take it away, Jim.
Okay, so now part 2 of what we should be talking about when we're getting a mid-century house landscape, or really any landscape, probably, any Midwestern landscape, ready for spring. And we did a great episode, I think it was last fall, but it might have been a year ago fall, on how to prep your house for shutting down for the winter season. And you had some great advice. So I will link to that in the show notes below because it's not relevant today, but for anybody that's thinking about taking good care of their yard, that's really relevant advice for big term planners and little tasks. But we're coming up on the season that's ready to start doing things for spring. And just as we were finishing last episode, you were saying there are, particularly for a fresh new landscape, you really can't start until the frost is out of the ground and also until plants have started to germinate and are ready to be planted. So that means some patience. But what about for somebody who has an existing yard that's just trying to make good choices for it?
There is still a proper timeline to look at for the various garden tasks. The big one to me that I mentioned to all of our clients immediately, and it ties back to that fall idea that we did previously talk about. Landscapers love to sell a fall cleanup because I think it extends their money-making season.
More tasks to do longer in the year.
Yeah, and some of them may come back at me for saying it that way, but I would prefer to see all of the dried plants standing through the fall and winter so that I have something to look at during the bleak winter months. Come spring, we do prefer a spring cleanup by a contractor or the homeowner, but, and you'll find this online all over the place, so it's not unknown information, but you can cut your perennials back too soon.
Okay.
And it is not in regard to the plant necessarily, but it's for the insects. There are various beneficial insects that overwinter in the dried stems of perennials or in the crown of the plant under the leaf debris. So, and you know this having lived in the Midwest a long time. You get that first 45-degree day with the sun out, and you think, summer's
Spring!
here. Yeah,
Everybody put your shorts on and go outside.
right. Right. I'm going to run outside in my shorts and I should start working on my yard. Well, that is totally not the case. And I'm guilty of it too. I am chomping at the bit to start working in my yard. Really, the only thing I will do, because I do have a lot of spring bulbs in my yard, and that old foliage from last year can kind of detract from the pretty tulips and daffodils that you might have growing. So I'm very selective in what I remove, quote unquote, early. But really, for the most part, I am not cutting back the stems of my coneflowers and my salvia and my alliums until sometime in May, mid to late May, ideally,
Yeah.
because I want to give the insects time to wake up and start doing their thing. There's a species of bee, I'm going to forget which one exactly, that is active like almost immediately and is often the one that's feeding on those first dandelions that appear in people's lawns.
So this goes to the like leave the leaves and no mow May
It
and
really is. Yeah,
campaigns like that. Yeah.
it is. Yep, leave the
So
leaves because the insects are hanging out still.
well, and you're champing at the bit to get outside and work in your yard, and I, as a lazy homeowner, I'm like, what is the least I can do? But I agree. I like to go out and, for me, the first sign of spring is out. My yard has a lot of snowdrops in it. And they just like pop up everywhere in the grass. And I don't care because by the time I get to the time of mowing them, they just sort of like disappear into the grass and they are in some of the planted borders. And I do tend to go in and sort of like clear out around them and make little spaces for their little green shoots to pop up. But the rest of it basically should be left alone. Is there a good marker? Calendar dates are probably less meaningful than the time after frost or
Actually,
a certain amount of foliage. How do you plan when's the right time to start?
I think you the last thing you said there is probably what I look for is if I start to see green growth in the perennials. And I don't mean like literally little tiny buds just poking out of the soil. I probably am waiting till there's an inch or two of that new growth to then cut back my perennials. That's the perfect timing in that the green growth won't get so tall that you're damaging it.
Chopping it.
In order to get the old stuff out. But I think even keeping an eye on are there insects flying around now? Because if they are, you've probably hit that point where they have woken up and are active, and you probably don't have to worry about, I'm throwing a bunch of them into the trash bag or the compost pile. Those would be, I think, the key signs I would look for is some green new growth. And are the insects active now? I would feel way more comfortable starting to cut back stuff if I saw bees and flies and, the occasional other bug active.
So from a house maintenance point of view, it kind of pairs with the time when you put your screens back in the windows and take down your storms if you have them.
Yeah. Honestly, that's probably
doing those outdoor projects.
Similar time of year, for sure.
So if you're thinking about not damaging the little green things, are you going after that with big shears? Are you breaking things off and moving away? Do you have like a technique you prefer to use to be protective of the next year's growth?
Yeah, it probably depends on each particular plant. If I can, I'm fond of just snapping things off. Spent allium flowers, you can typically pull them and they'll snap off. So you're just kind of yanking them out of the old plant, but they don't always yank. So then you do have to kind of stick your fingers in there and snap them off as low as possible. Hosta flower stems are the same way. The longer they're there and the longer they've had time to dry out, the easier it will be to just kind of snap them.
Mhm.
Uh, Other plants I will use hand pruners. I learned this from a client of mine with ornamental grasses, because hand pruning those on especially bigger grasses, you'll have a sore hand after doing just one plant. Um, Pull out the hedge trimmer, believe it or not,
Oh,
and
really?
it's like slicing through with, butter and a butter knife. You just drag that hedge trimmer across the crown of the plant and you're done. So those hand hand pruners and hedge trimmer are probably my three go-tos. Um, if I have spent flowers on my panicle hydrangeas, I'm typically just grabbing them with my hand and snap.
Hmm.
Uh, and sometimes I even just let the flower fall on the ground, or the spent flower fall on the ground. I'm a big fan of crunching things up in my hands. Um, Dried perennials in the spring are great for throwing on the fire pit as a good, fuel starter
Oh,
for that
yeah.
first fire. Um, yeah, it's very satisfying to then stand and, look back at your house and see everything cleaned up and all the new green stuff starting to grow.
That is, yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads to an interesting question too about how much, in an ideal world, how much yard waste is getting generated there? Are you trying to basically get things back to remulch in the area that they're in? Or I love the idea of fire pit starters. That's great. But like, how much is ending up by your curb in an ideal cleanup of spring?
That's an interesting question because there's a gentleman who's very well known in our world, local to Wisconsin. His name is Roy Diblick,
Hmm.
and he's very much as native and natural as possible when it comes to landscapes. And he has even gotten away from the idea of putting down traditional mulch,
Mm,
actually using the debris from the plants as the new
yes.
layer of mulch,
It's right there.
because it's right there. It's free. None of it goes in a landfill. None of it gets bagged up with leaves. And leaves, of course, are equally as good as mulch. You can collect your leaves and put them in their own sort of compost area. And what ends up being created is called leaf mold, which is at the bottom this very rich, almost soil-like
It's the good
additive
stuff.
that you can mix into your planting beds. I knew a woman gardener who was incredibly serious, and she collected the leaves from all her neighbors so that she could use it as mulch in her beds. So
Interesting.
there is this shifting school of thought about traditional mulch versus using the natural debris from a garden.
Hmm.
Um, it's a good segue into the other thing I wanted to mention that you can do too early in a landscape, and that is putting down new mulch.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That
Again,
looks so tidy. It makes you feel like I'm doing everything right in my home. If you and I always I feel like in my neighborhood, you see the like piles in the driveways, and you're like, oh no, I'm behind. They're
right.
winning, but maybe not. Maybe they're jumping the gun.
Yeah, and it isn't usually the homeowners, I think, as much as again, there are these mulch companies
The
out there, right?
arborists. Yeah.
Yeah, um, they come out and they blow the mulch into your beds and they're out of there. Well, this happened at one of my projects. The client emailed me and said, "Oh, I just had the mulching done." And I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute. It's only, the second week of April. What are you talking about?" Well, if you mulch too early, you prevent the soil from warming up
Oh,
naturally because
right.
you're sort of re-insulating it, and the sun won't get to the soil as easily. The frost is going to take longer to get out of the soil because you've essentially thrown a blanket over it,
Hmm.
and you are going to stunt your perennials from starting to grow again. Um,
Okay.
what even happened at this one project is because the right time to mulch is when you can see the green on the plants.
Okay.
If you can't see green, you don't know where the plants are.
So when you see the green, you know they're getting started and they can just keep going. But
Right.
before that, you might be holding them back by weeks
By
or.
covering them with mulch. Whereas if you
Oh,
see
of
the green,
course.
if you see the individual green plants, well, you're going to put the mulch in and around them as
Hmm.
opposed to just blowing a
Burying
cover
them.
of mulch over the entire surface and then wonder a few weeks later, well, why aren't my astilbes growing yet?
They've been covered over. Poor
Yeah.
things.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. So again, it's not a date. It's more of a sense of like how far has this particular year's spring progressed?
It's
Right.
being observational, and that may not be something, the average homeowner wants to hear, because it is easier to remember things, right? If it's a certain date on the
Put it
calendar.
on your Google Calendar and let it
Yeah,
recur. Yeah, I'm guilty of those little reminders. It's the only way I think about it. But maybe the reminder is start looking for it now rather than
sure.
go do it now.
Yep.
Well, that's great. And I think in a very similar manner to last fall's episode on what you should do to put your yard to bed, you're giving really sensible advice about you don't have to do too much too soon. This is not about perfection. It's about watching and observing your yard and then sort of supporting the plant growth that is there rather than dictating to it. Um,
And I would certainly argue it helps you to become better connected with your yard.
Well, and certainly. I mean, I think there's so many parts of householding that can feel just like tasks, more on your to-do list, a burden in many ways. But certainly from my perspective, thinking about things I do for my house, I love my house and I love its quirks and its features and its time capsule nature and the things I've chosen to do to it. So taking care of it, at least in theory, is fun. I need to repaint this year, I think. I'm noticing some weather beating on my south side, and I'm wondering if it's a maintenance paint job or if I want to use this as an opportunity to go for a new color. And
Mhm.
part of me is like, oh God, here we go. But on the other hand, what a thrill. I'll get to get really up close and personal with my beautiful original cedar siding again. And that's all part of the joy. So if you love your plantings, your beautiful yard, if you've invested some energy in it, then it's just a chance to go out and appreciate it.
And then also evaluate it, right?
Mhm.
Because plants are bound to have died over the winter, depending on what kind of winter we had. And that can be rodent damage. It can just simply be that we sometimes don't know why a certain plant dies.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's no different than why I was sick a week ago and my wife never got sick. There
Luckily,
is
raw
some
sometimes.
randomness to that. But that evaluation then is, well, I went to the garden center and picked these 8 plants because I thought they looked amazing and they all died. And, it may turn out that it was not a hardy
Mhm.
selection. Garden centers aren't always 100% truthful about selling plants that may or may not do well in a given area.
Yeah.
So, and regretfully, oftentimes those plants um, can be very expensive because they're oftentimes a newer variety, and newer varieties don't have a track record of survivability in certain climates. So, um, I think then, taking a step back and looking at, well, what's doing well in my yard? What didn't make it? Let's, not make that same mistake twice. Although if you're a gardener, you're going to probably try it 5 times before you finally give up. Um,
Well, and it could just be a bad batch or planted at the wrong moment. So maybe it's worth it to repeat. What do you think is a reasonable number of retries on
I
it?
think a second try is worth it. But after
Fair.
that, it could be the spot in the yard.
Mhm.
It could be the soil in that spot in the yard. It could have been a quirk of that particular winter. Um, it's interesting. Maybe it's this consumer age we're in, but I literally have to remind people that plants are living things. And it's not like, oh, my toaster died, I'll just run to Target and get another one. Um, we can plant 12 of one plant and 9 survive and 3 don't. And there is no rhyme or reason why that happened.
Yeah.
But I do know certain plants that are prone to not doing well. And I do know plants from having done this now almost 30 years, plants that are rock solid and nothing will kill them, like a ginkgo tree, which of course is why my company is named after that plant. But some of it is just trial and error and experience. But I think that that period or that opportunity of evaluation means, oh, well, maybe I don't like how this area I planted looks. Maybe I should try something different here. Or, oh, that plant got bigger than I thought it was going to be. Maybe I should move it before it's too late. Uh, those are the things I think a homeowner can do with their landscape. As always, I'm biased. There's a reason you should hire a landscape designer because I have all of that knowledge in my head. I have made mistakes. I have had plants die unexpectedly and learned from that.
Right.
It's never as simple as just going to the garden center on Memorial Day weekend and only buying the plants that all happen to be flowering at that time, because
Yes.
come July, you will
They'll all
have
be
no
done.
flowers in your yard.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is also where a certain amount of self-starting research can take you a long way. If somebody wants to sit down with a planting guide and remind me we'll put it in the show notes, but what's the link to the Plant Zone?
Oh,
research?
mobot.org,
Yeah.
Missouri Botanical Garden.
So that's such a good resource. But at the end of the day, there's still nothing like your weight of experience of having worked again and again with clients' desires and reaching for a specific outcome. Like we were talking about last week about somebody who wanted a Southwestern design or people who want a California influenced design, being able to navigate the complexity of choosing plants that are reliable, that will work well in this environment and will also meet those needs. You should just go get an expert's opinion. Yours is a good opinion to get. And then you don't have to wonder about it. I mean, you're right. Of course, plants are living things. They may or may not have a great season. But you can put a lot of bumpers onto the sort of bowling lane of how it's going to work and direct the outcome to be much more likely successful and easier to take care of at the same time.
I don't think people realize all the different factors that we look at when deciding what plant is going to be placed where in a landscape. And it's never even about just that single plant or that group of a single variety. I used to teach at the local tech college. I taught the landscape design courses in their Hort program. And I taught the entry level course and then the mid level and then the third level course. And the entry level ones were always the most interesting. And of course, in a tech college, you get people of all different ages, right? You have your typical college age student and you have your second career people, maybe. And I had an interior designer taking the course. And I think it was only the second or third week when I tell the students this, but there is literally a list of 15 or 20 factors that go into choosing plants in a landscape. It's the height. I won't give you the whole list here. It's the height. It's the width. It's the texture of the foliage. Is it fine texture? Is it big and bold like a hosta? What shade of green is the texture? Is it the foliage? Is it not green foliage? Do we want to mix in some burgundy or blue green or gold so that it's not just a sea of green? There's an old saying that green and is a color, even though we don't think of it as a color in a landscape because everyone wants flowers, of course. But after I ran through that list, I literally saw this woman's eyes rolling back in her head because I don't think she had a clue how complicated it is to choose, I'll just say this, a grouping of 5 plants that all work together with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe coming from interior design, where I would argue they have many more choices than we do, in terms of like fabric swatches, right? Or
Right.
paint colors for that matter. But I think she thought it might be as simple as just picking a few colors and seeing how they work together, where it's
Well,
not that at all.
No, and I think it's interesting. When we're working with fixed materials, and there are certain things that, like, you're going to test stain colors, you're going to test the actual cut of wood, you're going to test how it takes stain, you're going to do a bunch of stain. This is not picking from 4 options online, but there is a certain factor of, like, you just in an interior environment, you figure out your more complex piece. And maybe that's the hardest thing to buy or source. Maybe it's the thing that's most important to the client. Maybe it's the hardest to match thing. And then you just go down the list. So like paint color comes last because you can just sort of like take it to the paint store and have them spot match it to a particular fabric or a particular wood stain or a metal finish. But there is more of a decision tree of like you figure out the hard things first and then you just let everything else follow from it. But if you're dealing with plants, it's more like a matrix. Everything affects everything else. Every individual choice you substitute might trigger a cascade of disagreements in terms of anything from soil chemistry to the appropriate foliage density. Yeah, it's a very complicated puzzle to work out, to figure that out.
Well, we do. I'm drawing a blank already on what you just described it as your order of how you choose things. But we build a design with the structural plants first.
Mm-hmm.
So the woody plants, the shrubs, the trees, then the evergreens. So there's this layered effect that you start with the plants that will always be there.
Yeah, of course. That makes sense.
And certainly the evergreens that don't even lose their leaves.
Through every season. Mm-hmm.
Then you go down scale wise.
And
so
there's time. Sorry, this is blowing my mind.
Yep.
It is so hard.
You start with the larger shrubs, then you go to the medium shrubs, then you go to the perennials. But there are large perennials and there are small perennials. There are large grasses and there are small grasses. And literally, like you said, you may pick 3 ideal plants that seemed right for the situation or the location, but then you say, oh my gosh, all 3 of them have white flowers. I can't do that. I can't have 3 plants with white flowers next to each other. My favorite example, and homeowners should write this one down, is if you are going strictly on seasonal interest,
Mm-hmm.
you might pick a Siberian iris for the spring, a daylily for the summer, and an ornamental grass for the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I would use this example with my students, and I would say, why does this plant combo that I just described not work? It's because they all have the same foliage. They're all grassy.
Oh, they're all kind of long and spiky. Yeah, that's
Right.
Of course they are. Of course.
So just like not wanting to put 3 plants with white flowers together, I don't want to put 3 plants next to each other that have the same foliage.
So there's so many factors to compare and sort of check yourself. This is sort of goes back to the question I asked about how you put together a hardscape walk. Does it feel more mathematical to you? Are you sort of picking and plucking and sort of doing all the pieces in your head as you go along? Or do you kind of put it together and then say, oh, wait, nope, that one's not going to work, and have to sort of feel the resonance of it more instinctively?
It's pretty fluid. There can
You've
be
got a lot of experience under your belt to feed the instinct of it at this point.
Yeah. In when you're a student learning it, you're taught about bubble diagrams for outdoor spaces.
Yeah.
You're not just drawing a patio, you're figuring out maybe where the patio should be first. and maybe roughly the size of it before you actually commit to the shape of it. And certainly you're not even thinking about what material that patio is going to be until you've figured out where it's going to be and how big it's going to be. Similarly with plants, and students used to get hung up on this all the time because when you're learning your plants, you immediately latch on to your favorites, right?
Right.
You fall
I'm
in
going to put
love
this
with,
one in every design.
right. I fell in love with crab apples, so every design I do is going to have a crab apple tree. And I remember this one student, she couldn't figure out where to put a crab apple in her design. And I was like, well, that's odd because you're kind of going backwards. You've decided that you want a crab apple, but you can't figure out where to put it. The right way to do a landscape design is literally to simply draw circles of different sizes and then decide, well, that plant or that
Fills them in.
circle is going to be this plant.
Mhm.
And this group of circles is going to be that plant, and so on. And then, of course, as you start sort of filling in the blanks, right, with the plant choices, then you have to do sort of a pause and say, okay, well, wait a minute. I just did the 3 white flowered plants together mistake, or I just put 3 grasses next to each other and I didn't really want to do that. So there's a lot of then back and forth fine tuning, if you will, where you say, well, okay, I thought this was the plant for here, but I have to change it to something else.
Yeah, a lot of last minute adjustments and substitutions. It's really fun to see the outcomes of the work that you do. And I think it's really great that people get to hear in a conversation like this, all of the thinking that goes in behind it, because as with any design, it's complicated. But yeah, this, to me, it feels as complicated as trying to design an aesthetic outcome with cats. Like, how do you make them stay put? How do you guarantee they're going to behave the way that you want? Like, it's the aliveness of the plants adds an extra level of complexity to it that is so mysterious and impressive to me. And yet you have so many beautiful and various outcomes that you've achieved with them. So
thank you. You
that's
know,
the genius of it.
I liken it to what you do, or what a lot of interior designers do. At my old house, because my degree is in architecture, I designed our remodeled kitchen, but I don't live in the world of cabinetry. I don't live in the world of hardware. I don't even live in the world of doors, whereas you do.
Right.
So,
You do it all day, every day.
you have this mental library of all the companies, I'm sure, that sell mid-century style doors. And you have the mental library of mid-century paint colors. I do not. So I am very careful, as you are, to not, go off campus into an area that I am not an expert in. Can I dabble in it? Sure.
Right. You
But
can give general advice. You can say, oh, that's not a good idea.
Right.
And I would do the same for, well, honestly, hardscapes only. I don't talk to people about green things or
Right.
alive things.
So
But yeah.
I think all designers, whether you're a car designer or a toaster designer or an architect or a landscape designer, I think just because of how our brains work, we could design in any of those fields if someone said, Jim,
With
design
some
a toaster
experience,
for
yeah.
me. But I think we are also always smart enough to say, that's not my gig. You'd be amazed how many graphic designers I have had as clients. And to a person, they have all said, hey, I get design and I even may get color theory, but I don't know plants. So
Right.
I'm not going to try to design my landscape.
I mean, I think it's just that makes so much sense to me too, honestly, that a fellow designer in a different field would recognize the value of getting someone's niche expertise.
Mhm.
And I find as well, I've had a bunch of clients who work in design adjacent fields. And I feel like they're some of my most fun collaborations because they do have some fun opinions as we go through the process of choosing between options. They can easily read a plan and they'll have a lot of opinions and suggestions and sort of jumping off point requests. But yeah, just as I would not. It's unfair. I hack my way through web design and graphic design all the time as a necessity of marketing, but I know I'm not doing it the way that somebody who is trained in the field would do it. And I think that it's so fun to go through a design process actually with anyone. I enjoy doing it with people who are very well versed in the language and process of design, and it's really fun. You and I both, I think, have had in trying to craft a good client experience, a lot of time on the table in just trying to help someone who doesn't think about design all day long visualize what you're talking about so that they can make a good decision before it's executed and show them what they need to know in order to imagine it. And that's also really part of it. But
For sure. I mean, the bar is set very high when you have a client who is into design or is a designer themselves. I always joke that, you can't fool them with some industry language, right? They know it. You're not going to fool them with big words, so to speak.
No. They won't be tricked by the jargon. Well,
Yeah,
hopefully nobody will, but yeah, you can. It's funny. I don't think my design work changes. Our design presentations don't change. I do shorthand things more. Although in my case, and you too, also probably work with a lot of couples. It's rare to get a couple that both have a background in design. So then you sort of. Well, actually, this is an interesting experience I've had several times. I've had one half of a couple who's got a background in construction or design and the other doesn't. And part of the reason they come to me is that they want somebody to help make sure they're both speaking the same language and understanding what's happening in a similar way so that they can agree on it together and go forward.
Well, when you're married, you may find that even, the one spouse does work in the construction, but that doesn't mean their spouse is going to believe them that they are right? So you need that outside person.
Moderator?
Yes, the moderator. I say I'm throwing on my black and white striped referee shirt to say, okay, hold on here. I understand that the husband's an engineer, so he's got a very specific way of thinking. But then it turns out the wife is the one who is into absolutely symmetrical plantings.
Interesting.
So it can be playing the moderator between the two and coming to that happy medium.
Right.
But I love working with design people that are into design or are designers themselves, and naturally mid-century clientele tends to be that. But I also like working with that client that says, just make it look beautiful. I'm going to trust your judgment on the plants. We show our clients photos of every plant that we have in a design, and I fully expect them to tell me that there's one or two that they just don't like. But that's as simple as saying, I don't like the color of the sweater you're wearing today. It's really personal choice. But I will always defend our plant selections, because this has happened more than once. A client says, I don't like that salvia plant. And I have to point out to them that it may be the perennial that's blooming first in their yard. So if we take that plant out of the design, I am impacting the bloom period that they will experience over the course of the summer.
Well, and that just goes to like the thought that goes into your design plan. So sort of circle back around to our original topic. In order to get your spring joy as soon as possible, a well-designed yard with pieces that are going to appear at the appropriate times, starting as early as possible and lasting as late into the season as possible.
When you live in the Midwest, you want to have a landscape that, if possible, looks great year-round. And that is much more difficult than designing a landscape in Palm Springs or Texas or Florida that looks great year round. because the plants don't have as much seasonality to them as they
Right.
do in the Midwest.
But I mean, as a diehard Midwesterner, maybe there's not as much interest in the year because it's not changing. So we have that going for us. We get something new, hopefully, something new and beautiful every season, multiple times a season.
I'm glad you said that, because honestly, that's what I tell people is why I enjoy designing a Midwest landscape more, because I get to play with all four seasons as opposed to picking plants that are going to look great 9 months out of 12. I get to really choose some plants that look differently every 3 months.
That's really exciting and complicated. So that really goes to the challenge and the benefit of planning a great mid-century and Midwestern planting for your yard.
3 cheers for a Midwestern landscape, but really I think the takeaway here is that designing for the environment that you are in is always the right choice. And that's maybe perhaps more obviously true in terms of plantings. Some plants simply will not thrive outside of their environment, but it is also absolutely something that I bear in mind in design. And while I adore doing designs for my Midwestern clients, all of my clients are mid-century, I also find it really fun to lean into the regional specificity of designs for houses in Florida or in Washington State or around the Washington, D.C. area. There are little micro specificities that make each one of those spaces so fun. And while we can always cross-pollinate between them, we also lean into our regions. Well, that's all for today. Find the transcript and handy links for this episode in the show notes page at midmod-midwest.com/2313. And also head over there to make sure that your name is on the email list so that I can shoot you some recommendations for past great episodes from the back catalog to listen to while we take a little bit of a break. Or if you're looking for weekly content, I'm still going to be putting up YouTube videos of more bite-sized, pithy advice. Continuing with my series on the architect's eye, what stands out from your house to a mid-century designer. We've talked about metals, we've talked about lighting, we've talked about hardware choices, cabinet built-ins. Most recently, we stepped outside and talked about the front door. And I think coming up next is going to be house colors. So that's another spring project you might want to think about adding to your repertoire of exterior landscaping tune-ups. All of that at the show notes page at midmod-midwest.com/2313. It's been a pleasure putting this season together for you Midmod remodelers, and I'll be back soon with more great podcast content. Feel free to reach out and let me know what you'd like to hear about next. This episode was written and recorded by me, Della Hansman, and produced by Rebecca Rossi. If you'd like to support the show and mid-century homes in general, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode. You can help other people find us when you leave a rating and review, or recommend us directly to a friend with a mid-century house. Find more of Midmod Remodel on Instagram, YouTube, or pop right over to our website to check out our services. I would love to design a master plan for your home or teach you how to create one for yourself in my Ready to Remodel program. Thanks so much for listening to Midmod Remodel. I love that you love your mid-century house. I love it too.